Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Dark, Season 3, Episode 1 is called Deja-vu. So, full spoilers for the episode. As always, it is obviously great to have Dark back, one of our more intriguing shows to talk about, after, you know, a bit of a wait since Season 2. And, you know, I don't remember a lot of what we said in Season 2. I know there was a lot of theorizing in that last episode based on the ending, but I do think at one point I did say that the first episode of Season 3 might be the first episode of the show again, but in the second
honestly,
world.
I do vaguely remember you saying that. And I hate to give you credit for anything, so you must have done.
And I didn't remember that before I watched it. It's just as it was happening, I'm like, I think I said this. I think I said this was going to happen, but I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, I think that... Damn it, that annoyingly sounds familiar.
Yes, so what I didn't predict, of course, is that the Martha and for the, you know, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it Earth 2, right? Just to make things very obvious what we're talking about, even if technically we're not in a parallel world in the sense that, you know, in the way other things deal with parallel worlds, right? I think there's some speculation to be had there, but for lack of a better term, we're going with Earth 2.
Yes.
Reverse world might be better, given that they're going with a whole like reverse lettering theme. Even the title of the opening titles is in reverse.
Even some room layouts, house layouts.
So they're definitely playing with a sort of mirror image kind of thing. Although, notably, the words aren't actually spelled backwards, just each letter is flipped. Which I guess is just to make it easy to read.
I think it's just to make it nice for us to read and understand.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair point. But regardless, so yeah, Martha is essentially the Jonas, to the point where she's got the yellow raincoat. I mean, she's living in the house even. She's living in the Canwild house. And Ulrich's with Martha. Oh, no, not Martha, sorry, with Hannah. Too many names. Right? He's with Hannah in this world, but he's actually still cheating on her. He's cheating on her with Charlotte. And then we have but we still have the visual of someone like climbing down and putting on the hoodie as they sneak out the Canwild house. But in this case, it was Francesca. So much going on. There's so many details here to play with. Things that are of course different from the original episode. I think that the most obvious thing, though, pretty quickly, as soon as you see who's living in the house and it's not Jonas, I think the thing that most viewers are going to latch on to is that, okay, the one thing that's different in this world is that Jonas doesn't exist. That Mikkel doesn't go back in time.
Yeah, suddenly comments from Season 2 by Claudia, which we speculated about at the time, make a lot of sense. Because one of the big comments that she said to Jonas was, you know, I've seen a world without you, and I understand what's like. And we thought, oh, is this the, you know, does she somehow remember the first cycle? Yeah. But now it's clear that, oh, well, you know, she's seen this world.
Yeah, although, but there's a question to be had though. Like, does this second world only exist because a split parallel because of the two differences in the same world?
Yeah, that is possible, but that's kind of separate speculation at that point.
Yeah, I'm just saying technically this is maybe what the world's supposed to be, arguably, because Jonas by his nature shouldn't exist.
Yes, but it's very interesting because there is clearly still elements of time travel happening, even aside from, okay, we know Martha's going to be involved in some way. The fact that Elizabeth exists,
yes, but notably, Elizabeth and Francesca, and this is something they actually didn't reveal in the opening scene with Francesca when we see her sneaking out the house, is that now she's deaf, but Elizabeth is not. And it's funny because they cut straight to Elizabeth, because after you find out Francesca's deaf, it cuts to Elizabeth and immediately go, wait, is she going to speak? She's going to like speak and like hear things.
And she does in like 10 seconds.
Yeah, but there's just enough time so you're sitting there thinking about it as she's walking through the room before she finally says, Mom! And you're like, oh.
Yeah. But again, like, you know, the idea, okay, that either of those exist is a case that some level of time travel has to happen in this world as well.
I don't know if she's proof that time travel's happening in this world. There's definitely proof by the end of the episode that time travel's happening. We could just find out that her existence is different in this world, that she came from a separate source.
I mean, it's possible, but the fact that, you know, she's her own grandmother, you know, that whole
But that's not a fact
debacle.
In this world. You don't know that for a fact in this universe.
I'm willing to...
It's likely, but you don't know it for sure.
I think there is not enough difference between them for it to not be the case, is what I would say.
I'm just going to put it out there. There is a chance. There's a chance that it's not even her. There's a chance that it's Francesca in this
Yeah,
version.
I think that is a possibility as well, and that's why they made her deaf. But I think one of them has to be.
but there's definitely fishiness going on. So, I mean, those are the surface level changes like immediately. But we also have things like Killian, who's Martha's boyfriend, who is the brother of Eric, who of course is the missing kid at the start of the show and is still missing, in this version of the world. And they're going out to the woods that night, just like they did in the first episode. But unlike the original episode, it's not because they're doing something shady or looking for something. They're just looking for the brother. They're actually just going looking for his brother.
Yeah, and
so,
honestly, the biggest difference as well, that I think we've not mentioned, is just the lack of rain, which was the defining factor of that first episode.
Sure. Oh, sure. But like, I just want to point out here though that their motivations here are far more noble because they're looking for the missing kid. There's actually just kind of that change in motivation I think is extremely important because it's a completely different mindset from them going out there to like find drugs or whatever they were doing back in the first episode.
I think it was drugs. Yeah.
So I think that's really important from a character perspective and like just how different characters are in this world versus the original world, if at all. But in some cases, there clearly there's differences. For example, Peter is a priest in this world.
I love the moment that it kind of has him in the graveyard because he looks like Noah for a moment. And then you're like, oh no, it's Peter. It's a great little...
Well, given that Noah is actually his kind of son-in-law / father-in-law.
Yes. I was wondering which one you were going to go with.
Well, both.
Both. But I thought you might make a choice.
Not that he should look like Noah. I mean, because he's not really by blood.
Biological relation.
Unless in this world.
unless in this world there is.
Unless he's his own grandfather in this world, which I'm not going to put it past this show. Because anyway, so just to sort of forgetting the opening scene, we'll come back to that new element in a bit.
Yes.
The show opens with just the end of the previous season and Martha bringing Jonas to this world and says, "This is the day I first met you." So clearly this Martha we're looking at is one from later in the timeline. So, I mean, even before we get to anything else, there's a time travel for you right there.
Yeah, which is why I said from the start, like, we know there is because of Martha, but just on a broader scale in terms of existence.
Yes. So, Martha says, "This is the day I met you." So, clearly, when Jonas wanders into the school, he's going to meet, Martha of that age, and she's going to be like, "Who are you? You're kind of creepy. Why are you staring at me?" I love how the teacher doesn't even say, "Hey, do you need help? You've got like a noose mark around your neck," or anything like that. He just kind of glosses over it.
And he's got blood on his hands still, like because I think that's one of my favorite moments of the episode is he looks over at Martha sitting there at the table and then looks down at his hands covered in his Martha's blood. Yeah.
One actual detail I want to mention is that obviously Mikkel and Elizabeth, being their ages, have actually grown quite a bit since the shot season 1. However, they do acknowledge it. When they show up in the woods and Jonas shows up and sort of says, "This isn't right, where's Mikkel? This is, Mikkel's supposed to like go back, blah, blah, blah." And then Magnus has a line, not Magnus, sorry. Magnus. Yeah, Magnus.
That was Magnus, yeah. You're mixing up Magnus and Bartos again,
yes.
Aren't you?
Magnus has a line where he says something like, "Mikkel's old enough to look after himself." And I thought, that's interesting. Now, there's not much of a reason for it, really, I imagine, in the long run. But they're at least just using the alternate world to say, no, he's like 2 years old, I'll just go with it. Like, just we're in an alternate world. He's 2 years older in this world. Just
things are allowed to be slightly different because of ripple effects and such, so it's fine.
Yes. And he goes to speak to her a couple of times, one after she's done a little weird, monologue thing up in the stage.
Play that she did back in the first season as well. Oh god, I'm forgetting the name. The one about the labyrinth. It's the woman who had the thread.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you that. I don't know what the name is, but
it's going to bug me. But
yeah, but she says get lost. But of course, when they meet in the woods, he says that the things, the glitch in the Matrix, the Deja-vu. He's kind of, and obviously the title's double meaning. Of course, is both that we're literally having a repeat of the first episode, but also the importance of that little speech that he's had with her a couple of times, and she kind of, doesn't necessarily like get memories or anything like that, but it feels familiar. It feels like deja vu. It feels like something feels familiar about what you just said.
A hint of recognition, which is interesting in itself.
Well, yeah, but it's not the first in the episode either, because Peter has the same thing. He thinks Jonas seems familiar. There's something, he's like, have I seen you before? There's something there. And even Martha, when she brings him across, before she sort of leaves again and leaves him on his own, says there's a connection between our two worlds. Which is kind of why I go back to, I think they're kind of splinters from the same world. Like, they're two branches of what this world's supposed to be, but they both kind of develop their own loops essentially.
Yeah, I wonder if that's part of this mirror theme, and ultimately they're two halves of the same thing.
Yeah,
is why they're kind of fragmented that way.
Which does beg the question: is how does Jonas exactly fit in once things are merged together? If we assume that is the end of the story, is that they fix everything and everything comes back together. It's
interesting. Yeah, I just love how far they went with the mirror imagery. Just because obviously some of the stuff is easy to do, like the character stuff, and things like that. Some of the writing being backwards in titles, whatever. But as far as like the sets, like the Kampwirth house, the staircase is in the complete opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
Like just that's not just an easy thing. You got we got to rejig the whole set to do this now.
Yeah, I think the high school was as well. The sort of the main foyer. Like I'm pretty sure that all that's flipped.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if nearly every building is.
Yeah,
and credit to them for the commitment, because that you can't just we'll just go in same sets, just set right up. Here we go. You've got to put some work into that.
Yeah, and it's just those little things like when Hannah finds the hair on the hoodie, which is very similar to God, help me.
Katarina?
Thank you. Katarina finding the hair in season 1. That, of course, is a very similar moment in and of itself. And then she goes to the school to actually speak to Katarina and kind of like says, hey, and because Ulrich would have a reason to go and visit his kids. She even mentions that in the episode that the kids will be spending time with him soon.
Yeah.
And she says no. And there's this wonderful look in Katarina's face. Like, she knows why she's asking that, and she's kind of enjoying it a little bit.
She's been there.
It's interesting. But it does beg the question, like, how exactly did it develop in this world? I mean, because they're already together and living apart, and of course we haven't even mentioned the fact that Hannah's pregnant.
Very pregnant.
Yes, and who's in that belly? In the context of this show, who is in that belly?
My immediate guess is that it ties into the opening scene, but I mean, I could be way off.
I mean, is it a version of Jonas still? Just in the sense that, technically, Jonas's father is Ulrich's son, so from a DNA perspective, it's as close.
It's not a million miles off.
Because the mother's the same, obviously,
and it's just the grandfather essentially instead of the father.
Yeah, so
it's pretty close.
Is that how we still get a Jonas eventually in this world? Obviously, he's going to be much younger than Martha and all the other characters that we think of him as being contemporary with, but
that's the beauty of time travel.
Yeah, well, yeah, but will there be time travel once everything's fixed? Does that?
Who knows?
Does that all get closed off? Interesting things to ponder. And we see very similar scenes again where Ulrich's in the evidence room with Charlotte, and it's very similar to when Hannah. Was I doing Martha and Hannah? I feel like I was. I feel like I was mixing up those two names.
There was a couple of names you were mixing up last time. Magnus and Bartos was the one for definite.
But it's them going into that evidence room and kind of kissing, and although it's a bit different here. In fact, let's talk about the most important change of the whole show is that if it's not an eye, it's an arm.
That cracked me up because at first I didn't register the arm was missing. I was just like, oh, it's got both his eyes.
It actually took me a second to even recognize him because I'm so used to him with one eye covered that it took me a second to realize that was him. And then I'm like, wait, is he missing an arm?
Yeah, it's just like, because at first I was just so distracted by the fact he had both eyes that I was like, oh, he's got both eyes. Good for him. And then I looked down and kind of noticed. I was like, never mind. Yeah,
it's yeah. So
that feels like it's there just to be funny.
Yeah, it feels like it's just a joke. Yeah. And then Bartos' mum's already dead. I've forgotten her name. What's her name?
Regina.
Regina. There you go. Because Charlotte goes out to the power plant and gets questioning, and she's already dead. That's something that kind of is implied in that scene, and then sort of is made clear later at the graveyard. But so this episode is so much about dealing with all these new details. There's obviously one big new thing they're kind of teasing, and then the other thing at the end as well, which is obviously very important. But and it's funny because they got to the ending where we cut back to Earth to slightly older Earth to Martha, and it's doing this thing. It's got like this sort of time warping effect whenever it's changing time periods, which I don't remember it doing that last season.
It never did, because I just rewatched them. It has never done this before, which makes me think, I don't know if this is just time periods that it's switching, or if this is worlds.
Is this always switching worlds? Because obviously, the other time it does it in the episode, I thought it was still in the same world, but it might not be, and we'll maybe get into that in a little bit.
I think it's intentionally keeping that close to its chest and not making it abundantly clear right now.
Yeah, which world that's in. But we'll get to that stuff in a minute. I want to talk about the Martha stuff here at the end, because she goes to 1888, and I immediately went, did we go that far back last season? We definitely went to the 1920s.
We went to the early 1900s, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, interesting. And she goes into this barn, and there's like some Tesla coil things going off. And she says Jonas, and I went, wait a minute. How long does Jonas stick around in this Earth that he comes back to? And I was like, oh no, this is Earth 1. We're back in Earth 1 here. And this is Jonas on his way to becoming Adam, building the device that he had in the 20s. Right? Yes. So we're filling in these blanks. But she shows up, and he's all like, oh, you're alive, and touching her face. And but she's here, and she says something very ominous, and like about finding the origin of both this world and hers, the thing that centers the whole thing.
Thought it was fascinating that this age of Jonas has a moment where he thinks it's his Martha alive and doesn't immediately know that it's the other Martha that he's, we've seen him at the younger stage have dealings with now. Yeah,
my guess would be... Okay, there's two options here. Option one is that he's just so overcome with the emotion that his mind just kind of like lapses, and he wants to believe it's his Martha, right? That's the most obvious, and it's very human and believable, to be honest.
It is, yeah.
Option two is that her intermingling with the timeline is now introduced a new element where this Jonas never actually experienced that. There's now like a weird extra...
This is new. This is the final loop. Things are different, perhaps.
So that's a possibility. Those are things to get into. And we know that... Because we know that Magnus and younger Martha... Presumably, well, we assumed it was from Earth 1 at the end of Season 2. I mean, it could turn out to be the Earth 2 versions, but we know that they go back in time and are with Jonas, because we see old versions of them with old Adam in the 20s.
Was it Martha or was it Francesca?
Oh, it's Francesca. Sorry, you're right, Francesca. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I'm trying to remember? Did she talk? Did the old version of Francesca talk?
I don't remember. See, here's the thing. 2? I watched Season 2. I finished it about, I don't know, just over a week ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because I wasn't looking for it.
That could be such a tell sign if she didn't talk in that scene.
What I will say is, I don't remember that old version of Bartos having any visible tattoos, whereas this Earth's version, what did I say?
You said Bartos.
Damn it! You've just done that to me. This version of Magnus has tattoos, some of them quite visible on his hands.
Yes, Earth 2 Magnus has a lot of tattoos, notably on his hands. As well as his chest and all, but the hands it would be obvious anyway. So I think it's probably Earth 1 of those two, right?
Or at least one of them's Earth 1.
At least, that's all we need, the couple swapping over between Earths.
I know, but it was something that crossed my mind as I was watching it too. Like, oh, hang on, those at the end of the Season 2, which version were they?
But we know they're going back at some point to meet up with this Jonas. Jonas, this is like post-homeless looking Jonas. He's a bit more smart looking, a bit more sort of dapper, but he's obviously on his way to becoming Adam.
He looks like a well-respected gentleman of the time, but doing some mad scientist shit on the side.
He's cleaned up, yeah. So, interesting stuff. Now, we have to talk about, of course, the opening scene and then a scene in the middle of the episode. So... Basically, we have this character walk into it's like Adam's den where all the photos and all the family trees and all that. Yeah. And this character walks in, and I got really worried at the start of the episode because I didn't rewatch the show before. I rewatched Season 1 before Season 2, and that actually made me feel quite confident getting into this one because I felt like my foundation was really strong. Like, some names are a bit hazy, sure, because names escape, but and I still feel confident actually. But there was a moment of like fear in that for the first scene where the camera goes up to this guy's face, and I'm like, I have no idea who this is.
You went, oh god, did I make a huge mistake?
But no, luckily this is a new character, so it might be a mystery. He's even credited as like unknown man or something like that.
It's young unknown, normal unknown, and like old unknown or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because we have obviously the 3 ages of this same person, and we can tell very clearly it's the same person because of the scar on the lip I mean, they also wear the exact same clothes, which is also a bit of a tell.
And there's the narration that's going over it about, you know, it talks about standing in front of yourself as these three are here. So it's very clear.
But they burn this to the ground, and then the scene in the 80s, which I would lean towards being Earth 1, actually, given that effect now. And now that we've seen the whole episode, and I've got context, maybe a lot more for it.
That's my assumption as well.
But they go to the old man who owned the power plant. You know, because he passed it on to not Regina, Claudia, of course, and they murder him in his house. You know, he pulls out the old what do we call them?
Garrote.
The garrote, and you know the kid goes in first, and it's just kind of this weird thing where the old man's like saying, "Hey, get out! Like, what are you doing in here? I'll call the police." But then, of course, the other two versions walk in, and obviously the one who's like middle aged is the sinister one because he's not old and weak, he's not young and easy to fight off. He's the one in his prime. So
yeah. There's a nice touch where the other two, you know, old and young, are stood off to the side, and they're both like leaning against the wall, and at the same time they both do this thing where they, you know, cross their hands in front of them and just to, you know, into this pose to relax.
Yeah.
But they both do it at the same time, and it's really effective.
Yeah. So we have 3 ages of this new mystery character, which is a very interesting visual, and it's obviously we've had so many characters in this show where we've met older versions, younger versions, we've had twists where someone turns out to be someone else. I think it's very interesting to have a new mystery character who we just get to see all the versions of right away and say, no, this person, whoever it is, operates as a unit with 3 different ages of himself.
Yeah, there's no surprise as to who this is in terms of, we're going to throw in a new aged, and, you know, and like, oh, you didn't see who this was coming, but more just, we have no idea who their identity is at all from the start. So
that is very fascinating. There is a scene where Tiedemann goes off to Eric's father, and obviously that would be Killian's father as well, I suppose. Yes. I've really mentioned Killian, he's just kind of there. I mean,
he's just kind of there to irritate Jonas.
Pretty much, yeah. Obviously he's looking jealous every time he thinks Martha's talking to him, but obviously the big thing that happens is, you know, we're going to the signature montage about 10 minutes from the end is this is when everything was going on originally, and we get this weird new element where it's Martha who in the yellow coat is running around in the woods. She gets separated from everyone else and she hears a noise,
and there's a terrifying whisper of her name,
and it's a woman who I couldn't recognize, and maybe it's someone we know, maybe we don't, but it was hard to recognize her either way because it's like she's been drenched in oil. There's like sort of black goo kind of.
Yeah, at first I thought it was blood, and I was like, no, it looks too dark, and oil's maybe a reasonable guess.
I wonder if it's like a liquefied form of like the energy that makes the black hole that we've seen.
Maybe. I wasn't sure who she was either. I thought, well, maybe this is a version of Martha, and it's so hard to tell under all that, though.
I think what's interesting about this is clearly more, I don't know, it feels more supernatural than anything else that's been in the show.
It feels supernatural, but I'm certain that it ties in perfectly with
I'm sure it does
the
as
internal
well.
Logic.
I'm sure it does as well, but I just, it definitely felt and was presented as more of a scary supernatural thing. Of course, they run off to the bunker. All the electricity is going nuts in the town. The birds are falling from the sky. Some of this obviously syncs up with what happened in episode 1 of the original season.
Yeah.
Some of it's obviously new. For example, them being in, because obviously in the original, we had Peter and Ulrich's dad, Tronte, what's he?
Yes.
Yeah. We had them expecting the kid coming through the time vortex, you know, and this is the thing, immediately, you know, Martha checks the name tag and it's like, wait, this is my uncle. this is you know, Ulrich's brother who went missing in the 80s. So
yeah,
this is a very interesting idea here that these kids, these 4 or 5 kids, find the young missing brother of Ulrich, and they are seeing the direct effects of this time travel, and clearly from this point on, the events are going to splinter, because they've been relatively close this episode, obviously with some key differences, but it feels like this has to propel it in a very different direction from what the original season did. But there's so much for this show to juggle, because like we have to explore maybe what the changes are now that things are going forward, but we have this new threat and this mystery character with the 3 ages, but we also have to, like, I think we're also very curious as to how certain plots advanced in the other timelines in the original Earth. Like we definitely want to know some of that, how some of that stuff developed and ended up. So
yeah, it's really fascinating that we can almost do nothing in the quote unquote present day because it's directly into the apocalypse. That was where we left it, Apocalypse Day.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see them just leaving that entirely and just not wanting to ruin the mystique of, you know, where that ended up in the future.
Oh yeah, I don't expect to see it. I don't expect to see present day because of that, but
other time periods,
80s, 50s, maybe 20s, but definitely, you know, and clearly the 1888 is going to be a time that we're going to spend.
That's just what we need, isn't it?
Which of course is, you know, even further back. So yeah, there's so much stuff for this show to juggle, and it's like 8 final episodes. Well, 7 now, 7 left.
Yeah. And we've still got one more pretty major element to talk about from this episode.
Yeah, go on.
The ending with Martha. So yeah, you know, Jonas is looking around in the house, seeing that you know Mikkel is there. He's not going missing. He doesn't understand, and he comes out and he's greeted by, you know, an older woman.
I refer to this in my head as Adam Martha.
Well, this is interesting. I can see that comparison, but for me, as much as Martha is the...
You're thinking Claudia, but
Yeah.
The reason... I get that she looks more like Claudia, but just in the sense that she's this world's Jonas, so the old version I'm going to refer to as Adam Martha.
I get that, but she feels like she's taking the role of Claudia in being that guiding figure here.
Which does beg
rather than Adam, who's, you know, much more insidiously manipulative, shall we say.
Which begs the question, like, did Claudia have much of a role in this Earth? Like, what's the difference with her here in this world?
Right, and this is what intrigues me. You know, I mentioned earlier, Claudia said she'd seen a world without Jonas, and you know, and she said, and it's not good. So she's seen some of what happens here next for the rest of the season, presumably. She knows the outcome is potentially worse than the version that you know we're accustomed to somehow.
Well, does she know the outcome's worse, or does she just know that the world in general is
that's
bad?
a fair point.
You know, like, does she know that the outcome is significantly worse or better? I mean, I'm going to say, I mean, it's even implied in this episode. I think it's even old Martha who says it. That the end point for both worlds is bad. Like they're both basically going to the same end point, regardless of the differences.
And there's a lot of talk of, I think it's the kids talking about, oh well, hey, you know, there's an apocalypse due. It was predicted for, you know, soon.
Yeah, because she says that even without you, the world's still ending towards the apocalypse in the same day. It's not like it's actually made a significant difference. So there's definitely things to explore here. I mean, if I had a complaint of season 2, because season 2 was really good. The only complaint I really had, I think, was that every so often some of the monologues about good versus evil were a bit hokey in the context of everything else.
Sure.
And there was not anything like that in this episode.
No. My only complaint on a rewatch was the very predictable montage. I got a bit annoyed by the formula. Like, I felt it being formulated, like, 10 minutes from the end, time for the slow, sad song.
I don't mind that so much, because to me it's almost this show's like signature thing of like towards the end of the episode, before we get to our last couple of scenes, it's just a case of, okay, here's where everyone is before we go to the next episode. You know, this is just a recap of where everyone's ending their story for this episode.
I get it. I'm just not sure it needed it in every single episode. Because I was really noticing it when I don't know.
There's so many characters and so many things going on. Maybe in a rewatch it hurts more because you just know things better. But I think it actually does a good job of like keeping the audience just, you know, reminding us of everything that's happened this episode, keeping us all, you know, up to date. You know, thinking of all the details and where all the characters are. So I am terrified of going into like the 80s and the 50s and Earth 2.
I am fascinated. Yesterday, so this was obviously before this aired, so this isn't any spoilers. So I didn't like accidentally read a spoiler or anything, because that's always a concern when the show drops. I have to be careful from here on out.
Yeah.
Just, you know, someone posting some of their theories, and I was, you know, having a nosy, seeing if there was anything I'd overlooked. And there was a great theory about Adam that I don't know how much weight it has, but the idea that Adam isn't actually Jonas and Adam was actually Mikkel. And the idea is we never saw the body for Michael at that point. And, you know, okay, we know Adam has noose, you know, the mark like Jonas does, but so would Michael. And then there's all these ideas of him manufacturing it for that reason, and it was a fascinating theory.
But they'd have to sell me on it, but I mean, you know, it's...
I was like, do you know what, there's a lot of things where you tell me and I'll be like, oh, I don't want that. I think on this show, there is very little you could suggest as, oh, this is what they're going to do. And I'd be like, oh, I really don't want that, because it's done such a good job of committing to every idea possible and doing everything in a unique way that I'd kind of be okay with whatever it ends up being.
Hmm.
I hope.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what they do. The show is just adding layers and layers, and all the intentional imagery that they've got going in this, and sort of flipping what certain characters look like, like, and how they correlate to the original version of the show. Even Bartos, we didn't even mention him much, but even he does feel he's not as smarmy and like arrogant looking. He looks like a lot more quiet and nerdy, and it was different.
One of the only characters who feels more or less identical is Helga.
Yeah, old man Helga. Yeah, because he's sitting there muttering to himself about everything happening
again. Yeah. Which feels pretty much bang on.
But it's interesting that he didn't raise Peter in this Earth to, grow up and deal with some of this, which is kind of...
No, that's true.
What happened at Earth 1, give or take.
And
so
I don't remember Helga ever saying the TikTok bit, but maybe I'm misremembering that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. It's a bit away.
That one little element felt new, but I could be misremembering.
I could not tell you, but man, this show loves to, like, even in season 1, just dealing with the 3 different time periods was much. Now that we're dealing with alternate universe.
Yeah, and even the stuff like the factory where Jonas is in the 1800s, got Tannhaus on the gate, which was the watchmaker.
Yes. No sight of him this episode, at least, well, as far as we know.
Yeah.
But no sight of the watchmaker as of yet. No, it's of interest, a lot of very intriguing elements. I'm very excited to see, because there was a couple of moments in the episode where I was almost worried that, like, this could very easily start to feel a bit stale, because it is just doing episode 1 again, right? But there's enough things. Every time you think it's just starting to settle into, I feel like I've seen this before, it throws you a little curveball. It's just a little extra thing here, or whether it's as simple as a character speaking who used to not speak, or whether it's as simple as, oh wait, now this character is this profession, or this character is this. Like, I mean, there's some things we've not had answered yet that might still turn out to be different. Like, is Hannah still a masseuse? I don't know. I mean, maybe she is. I mean, it's not important, perhaps, but
I'm willing to guess she's on maternity leave regardless.
That's also true. Yes, makes sense. She seems self-employed though. So I mean, do you get maternity leave when you're self-employed? Do you just?
I mean, you do with the UK. You get government sanctioned stuff. I don't know about the US or Germany in this case, obviously.
Yeah. Why did you say US?
I just mean for a lot of our audience who are familiar with that, and for that question.
Yeah. Okay. But we're talking about just Germany. We're...
Obviously, I don't know Germany's systems. I'm not an expert.
Yes. Well, clearly, because you're getting the US and Germany mixed up, so there's clearly some
I
some
get
wires
them mixed
crossed.
up. I was just talking about the commonalities for our audience. I don't know. For them, they might have a different experience to us.
All right. So that's episode 1. Very intrigued. Obviously, as we go, I'm sure we'll have more theories and more, things to try and click together into place. So obviously, we will be going through this as quickly as we can. Try to get the reviews up as quickly as we can. This first one's going out early Sunday, and then hopefully we're going to try and hit them daily. We'll try our best to do that, and we'll see if we can hit that for most of the next week or so, and get them out in a timely fashion. So obviously, do not talk about future episodes in the comments. This is just about episode 1. That is for the other commenters as much as anything else. And please do, of course, like and subscribe and all that stuff. You can support us that way, and you can also support us financially by getting us on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you can support us there for as little as $1 per month, and keep all the content coming. Also get us on Twitter at @mail_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?